Good evening and welcome to Wednesday, August 16, 2023, 6 p.m. regular Planning Commission meeting. The meeting now will come in order. Tonight's invocation will be given by Ms. Sayed, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Ms. Flores. Okay, everybody stand, please.
Dear Lord, we thank you for the ability to come before you with this commission. We invite you to be here with us this evening and to grant us wisdom with each case and situation that is presented before us tonight. In your name we pray.
Now for the Pledge of Allegiance, place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissions, please be announced any item you are recusing from due to a conflict of interest prior to the item being heard. Secretary, will you give me a roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Barcena,
Present.
Commissioner Gomez is absent, Vice Chairperson De La Rosa,
Present.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Present. At this time, we're gonna have the city attorney. Is the city attorney online with us?
I am here. Yes, this is Adrian with Olivares Madruga. As
Okay,
acting
will
as
you
secretary.
gonna make some comments?
Yes, this is comments in regards to the approval of the agenda. Commissioner Gabriela Gomez filed her leaving office statement yesterday after being appointed to the council. No one is ever permitted to serve on both bodies because the council decides the appeals of the planning commission actions. So one cannot vote on both the original decision and the appeal. This leaves 3 members of the planning commission, which still does constitute a quorum. Would the chair please ask for a motion to approve the agenda with the change of eliminating Ms. Gomez from the body? The motion requires a second, after which the chair can simply ask if there are any objections.
Thank you. Commissions, will you want to make a motion to eliminate Ms. Gomez from the body?
I second the motion.
In a second.
Second.
Any opposed? No one? Give me a roll call, please, Secretary.
Sure. Commissioner Barcena,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson De La Rosa,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes, thank you. We will begin with the item number 1 in the agenda at this time. I will open public hearing at 6:04. May I have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Chairperson Rivera and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Adrian Flores. I'm the Associate Planner for the City of Bell Gardens Planning Division. This presentation is to introduce you guys to the ordinance number 938, which is zoning code amendment number 2023-050, alternative standards and exceptions to required parking. A little background on this ordinance. On February 14th, 2022, the city adopted the 6th cycle general plan housing element update, which included programs to alleviate minimum parking requirements to facilitate housing development. And on September 2022, the California governor signed Assembly Bill 2097, which added Government Code Section 65863.2, which would prohibit a public agency from imposing or enforcing any minimum automobile parking requirement on any residential, commercial, or other development project that is within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop, with minor exceptions. AB 2097 became effective on January 1st of 2023. Now, amending and adding definitions is essential to implementation of state and local statutes. So the proposed ordinance would add definitions and clarify existing definitions. Proposed language is added to remove ambiguity and regarding eligible housing projects. AB 2097 prohibits minimum required parking for residential, commercial, and other development projects located within 1/2 mile of a major public transit stop. State code defines a major transit stop in 3 aspects. First aspect is an existing rail or bus rapid transit station, a ferry terminal, or a intersection of 2 or more major bus routes with a frequency of service interval of 15 minutes or less during the morning and afternoon peak commute periods. The ordinance also provides exceptions to AB 2097. A local jurisdiction may impose and enforce minimum parking if the city can show evidence supporting that the absence of off-street automobile parking would have a substantially negative impact. The city will need to make the written findings within 30 days of the receipt of the completed application that not imposing or enforcing minimum parking requirements of the development would have substantially negative impact as allowed by law. The ordinance will also permit compact parking spaces. Now, compact parking spaces would be permitted for residential uses through a affordable housing incentive under Chapter 9.59, Affordable Housing Density Bonus and Incentives. Depending on the type of affordable housing project, parking requirements may be limited. Therefore, permitting compact spaces will allow developers to voluntarily provide parking, as compact parking spaces are smaller in size and can be easily located on a site when compared to a standard parking spot. The ordinance also proposes to require bicycle and electric vehicle parking. This will align with local and regional goals for facilitating housing production and benefits to the reduced environmental impact from development. In certain conditions, the ordinance proposes that bicycle parking may replace automobile parking, and in addition, electric vehicle parking requirements are exempt from AB 2097. Ordinance 938 will be consistent with Bell Gardens general plan land use element and housing element. Under policy number 2 of the land use element, ordinance 938 would be consistent with it emphasizes the city's commitments to promote compatible residential development and ensure safe housing. The ordinance would allow an innovative use of land and density to increase housing security and availability. Minimum parking requirements have the potential to hinder housing development projects by not allowing developers to build on the max permissible density due to the allocation of parking facilities, requiring compliance with the maximum capacity and one-size-fits-all approach parking. Under Program 6 of the housing element, Ordinance 3 will be consistent because the housing element indicates the city will permit residential compact parking spaces as an affordable housing incentive. As previously indicated, permitting compact spaces will allow developers to voluntarily provide parking, as compact spaces are smaller in size and can be easily located on a development. Ordinance 9.3 is also consistent with Program 13 of the housing element, which requires the city to facilitate code amendments and removing the requirement for fully enclosed garage parking. Requiring garages can hinder development of additional housing units, as construction garages can add additional costs to developers. The intent and purpose of the ordinance and AB 2097 is to provide substantial benefit to the city of Bell Gardens in fostering development across all housing categories. And it would also reducing the oversupply of automobile parking can help in these ways. It could transition communities away from over-reliance on automobiles, increase the availability of housing stock, encourage orderly development, and improve air quality, as fewer vehicle miles traveled can lead to reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So now staff recommends that the commission open the public hearing and receive public testimony, and find that the recommendation of the proposed ordinance is exempt from the provisions of California Environmental Quality Act, and close the public hearing and adopt resolution PC 2023-07, recommending to the city council approval of zoning code amendment number 2023-050, and adoption of ordinance number 938, amending Title 9 of the Bell Gardens Municipal Code. That concludes my report. Staff and city attorney is available for any questions commissioners may have. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Could you please specify which areas would be affected by the proposed amendments? And would also our local town trolley, play a role in the implementation of this amendment?
Sure, yeah. So we actually did look into this, and to answer the first question, the area that would be affected by this would be the intersection of Florence and Garfield Avenue. So any projects within a half mile of Florence and Garfield Avenue would be affected by this bill. And to answer your second question, in terms of the city trolley, that wouldn't constitute a major transit. So it wouldn't fall under this bill.
More questions, commissions? I on the housing element, can you explain a little more on that element? What's the parkings that we might be giving breaks, or what's the? I just want an explanation on the whole thing, please.
Sure, yeah. So the housing element provides programs and policies to facilitate housing development. And there were some programs in the housing at 6 cycle housing element that was adopted. And one of the programs would require us to permit compact housing for affordable housing development, which is one of the reasons why we are allowing compact spaces as part of this ordinance. The second program that falls under the housing element is eliminating the requirement for garages. Right now, the code requires projects to provide one covered space with the garage and one uncovered space. So we're removing that and providing developers with the opportunity to provide open parking spaces.
So you're saying that if we build 7 apartments, you can have 14 parking outside, no garages. That's correct?
So the garages aspect of it is removed, but we will still require covered parking spaces. So that could be under a carport in lieu of a garage.
And who's going to be the decision that who's going to make the decision? The planning commission or the director of the development?
So as of right now, as part of this ordinance, it would be up to you guys to make the decision if you would want to move forward with removing the garage requirement. However, at the time of implementation, it is up to the developer to propose a garage or a carport.
Okay, any questions, commission? I have no more questions. We will now open for public comments. Secretary, please announce the instructions for public participations.
The members of the public will now have an opportunity to speak on public hearing item number 1. Please state your name for the record before addressing your comments to the members of the Planning Commission. Each speaker written comment are limited to 3 minutes. Callers wishing to make a comment may do so at this time by dialing *9 from your phone. When instructed, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Individuals joining through the Zoom app may request to make a comment by using the raise hand feature on Zoom and select the unmute or microphone icon when instructed. We will begin to hear from the members of the public that are physically present in the council chambers. If you haven't done so already, please submit your comment cards now. And Chairperson, we did receive one comment card at the moment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Bruce, Crowe.
I won't sit down. Oh, it's all right. Good evening, Planning Commission. Interesting, requiring an ordinance to be exempt of any parking requirements. It didn't mention anything about carports, but it did mention of exempting developers from providing a garage. You want to eliminate the garage and put more housing in so you can pack more people into the facility. Now, if you mention Florence and Garfield, that means a business, I would assume. I'm not going to say that's a residential area, but you're basically saying that if they reside or build this building within a half mile, they don't have to put a garage on there or require any parking. So you're trying to eliminate people driving in their cars, which is your freedom and liberty for an individual. Fossil fuels, gasoline powered combustion engine vehicles is how we get around. You'll provide a little penance for electric vehicles, which, you know, isn't going to help anything. But a half a mile from a bus stop or public transit is about 900 yards. That's 9 football fields. So if you put a place and want to build a place within 9 football fields, you're not going to have a place to park a car. So you're not going to be in your car. And how far are you going to be able to go on that bus? Not very far, because we know we're going to curtail the bus activity, because you can't even get on them now because of the crime and other stuff that goes on. But I just wanted to bring up again, 2 acronyms, SDG, which is Sustainable Development Goals, and ESG, which is Environment, Social, and Governmental, and then LEED certification. I haven't heard anything about ESG. How is this going to be sustainable? Is it going to be environmentally sustainable? Nobody has said anything, and nobody has given any report as to how it will be sustainable. And if this is what you're going to force on everybody, it should be rejected. You should go back to the drawing table until you explain what SDG is, ESG, and LEED certification is when building new buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary, any more speakers on the internet?
Chairperson, we did not receive any more comment cards, and nor do we have anybody in the chat line wishing to speak on this item.
Thank you. There is no objections by the Planning Commission. I will close the public participation. There are no additional questions or comments by the Planning Commissions. Any questions? I would like to ask regarding this, a little more explanation of what this no parking, if we put any building on Florence and Garfield, that means they're not required to have parking.
I'll take this one.
And also I would like to know if this is a mandate from the state or we can do our own laws, or we need to go back and figure out, because that's going to be a very tough if we build a 5 floor building. Where are we going to park all those cars? I mean, I'm worried about it now. That where all these cars going to go?
Good evening, Chair. For the record, Stephen Jones, City Planner. I am definitely sympathetic to your concern, and that question is a good question. So the state AB 2097 doesn't say that we can't, or
Give
that
me a
there's no
favor, will
required
you-
parking. Sure.
Can you state your names for the record, please?
Sure, Stephen Jones, City Planner.
Thank you.
All right. So AB 2097 says that we can no longer require a minimum required parking for certain parameters. And one of those things I wanted to clarify was that it needs to be a major transit route or transit station, which is the intersection of 2 or more bus routes that have a 15-minute peak commute hour interval. And so that's where we got the Florence and Garfield corner, because there's only one intersection in the city that actually meets that definition. And the prohibition is for us to not have any more required minimum parking. Doesn't mean that we can't ask for parking. It doesn't mean that a developer couldn't come in with parking that they want, because obviously people are still working and driving and living, even in some cases, in their cars. And so there does need to be that consideration. And so a developer could say, yeah, I want a 5-story building, but instead of the 400 spaces that you guys need for minimum required parking or whatever that would be, I want to come in with 2 or 1 or whatever that may look like. So there's opportunities for us to negotiate what type of parking is brought in. But then beyond that, when it's a discretionary item, it comes to the Planning Commission, for example, and we could either hear from the public that this would be a negative impact on our environment in terms of us, the city, rather providing space for affordable housing, or just a negative impact on the environment in terms of the existing quality and level of service for parking and traffic. So it's not a given that minimum required parking can't be implemented, but there needs to be findings to show that this is going to be a negative impact. And it has to be a preponderance of evidence. So it can't just be an anecdotal, yeah, I don't think this is going to work, but there's got to be some sort of parking survey or traffic counts that the Planning Commission could analyze and consider and say, what about this developer? What does your expert say? Or what does the implication that there's going to be a negative impact on the city do in regards to the project proposal? So to recap, doesn't mean that we can't ask for parking, doesn't mean that the developer can't volunteer parking that may or may not meet the minimums that we require. We can no longer absolutely require it. So that's why the title of the ordinance, for example, is to expand parking exceptions. So they can make the argument that I don't need the minimum required parking because we have a car sharing program or because we are requiring valet or something like that. There's different opportunities for us to also look at extracting programs like that from developers if they're willing. But the negotiation still stands, or still is an opportunity and an alternative for us to look at ways to make sure there isn't a negative impact. Beyond all that, there still is the opportunity for the community or for staff or for the Planning Commission to say, providing no parking or providing minimum parking or providing a certain number of parking would be a negative impact on our ability to maintain the level of service and the level of quality that we're currently enjoying, or our ability to provide, again, for example, affordable housing. So if we make those negative impact findings, and they've got to be, again, under a preponderance of evidence, so it's got to be something that we can support and justify, we don't have to approve a project that says I can't provide any parking, or I can only provide 10 spaces for my 10,000 square foot development. And the likelihood that a developer is going to come in and somebody that wants to see a development succeed and say, hey, I'm just going to bring a development in and I'm going to provide no parking. Well, there's not going to be very many people that would support that not only in terms of support for the project's approval, but I don't go to places that I can't park if I'm driving. So it's not likely that a developer is going to say, yeah, no parking at all. I just want to get this done. So there's ways to be compliant with the state's regulation without sacrificing all of Bell Gardens to just development and no parking. So it's not that there's no parking, it's that we can't say there's a minimum required parking. Let's talk about how that negotiation process works before we see the planning commission. And then there are, again, opportunities for the public to make their arguments and for the planning commission to consider before either approving or disproving or recommending approval or disapproval to the city council.
So how is gonna be triggered to come to the planning commission? Or who's gonna make that decision? And that's what I'm trying to figure out, because
It depends on the type of project. So when you mention 5 stories, most likely that's going to come before the planning commission. That's not something that staff would have discretion to say yes or no to. So the types of projects that you mentioned earlier are coming to planning commission regardless of whether or not we agree or disagree with the amount of parking they're proposing. That's going to come to you. What our job is to do is hopefully, again, extract the most parking we can that makes sense for the development as well for the city. But that negotiation is something we're going to bring to you for you to consider instead of the whatever minimum number we would have required. Let's talk about what they're proposing and how that impacts the community at the opportunity. At the point at which the community's notified of the public hearing. That's where we would receive comment about whether or not this is going to be a negative impact. Property owners, business owners, anyone that's interested can make the arguments with findings and support that's going to say if they provide 10 spaces for this amount of development, here's how it's going to negatively impact the community and the street or this area. So there's got to be some evidence, but that's all coming to you for your consideration, analysis, and review.
I didn't see it on the report. They will come to the planning commission. That's why I'm worried about it.
Well, that doesn't change because whatever comes to the planning commission originally is still going to come to the planning commission. So there's types 2 and 3, and the site plan reviews that come to you guys is always type 3. The conditional use permits that come to you guys always is going to come to you still.
Okay.
So there's no change in the types of project that you're seeing. But in that area or in this specific area of Florence and Garfield, if there's something that comes in this particular area, you'd be notified well in advance of whether or not they're meeting the required parking and how we can either accommodate their exception from parking or, again, negotiate in terms of what they're actually providing.
Okay.
So, yeah,
I
it
just
doesn't
want to
change.
make sure that we're straight, that our people, our residents doesn't get no protection, especially when we mention this area that in the past, we have some concerns about parking with the residents on that area.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's a problem, but I'm just saying that I want to make sure that we are protecting in the future. And I'm not saying, it's nothing is being presented, but I want to make sure that we don't, for lack of words, probably, we don't want to make it a worse area than what already is.
Absolutely.
As far as parking.
And this actually gives residents and laypersons and people, neighbors, interested parties tools to make those arguments in a meaningful way. So we're asking for information about what makes it a negative impact and not just let's, create a story, because you can have a real lived experience and it not translate into an effective testimony. And so the ordinance actually gives effective testimony clues as to what could help the planning commission make a finding that would be supported or justified in terms of the amount of parking that a developer may or may not want to provide. We can now, again, make that justification with some meaningful and articulate arguments. So that the ordinance actually gives clues into what would constitute a negative impact.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? No more? Okay, I might entertain a motion to approve a staff recommendation as noted in the staff report and presentation.
Chairperson, if I may, I just, for the record, we closed the public hearing at 6:31 PM. I just wanted to state for the record the time that we closed the public hearing, which is right now at 6:31 PM. You can now move to make a motion.
Okay, thank you. Missions?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendations for the public hearing items. Number one, zoning code amendment number 2023-050, exceptions to required parking ordinance number 938.
Second,
Go ahead and second that.
Secretary, will you please give me a roll call?
Sure, Commissioner Barcena,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson De La Rosa,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes, thank you. Next item, public hearing item number 2 will now be on the agenda. Staff is requesting for the commission continue the zoning code amendment to the next regular scheduled meeting. We need a vote on this one. We need a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Second.
Need a motion and a second? Okay, thank you. Give me a roll call to, please, Secretary.
Sure, Commissioner Barcena,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson De La Rosa,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes,
And just for the record, this is requesting to continue zoning code amendment number 2023-062.
okay. Public comments on the agenda items, they will now be open for items listed on the agenda. Secretary, please announce the instructions for the participation.
The members of the public will now have an opportunity to speak on agenda items. Please state your name for the record before addressing your comment to the members of the Planning Commission. Each speaker and written comments are limited to 3 minutes. Callers wishing to make a comment may do so at this time by dialing *9 from your phone. When instructed, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Individuals joining through the Zoom app may request to make a comment by using the raise hand feature on Zoom and select the unmute or the microphone icon when instructed. We will begin to hear from members of the public that are physically present in the council chambers. If you haven't done so already, please submit all your comment cards now. And we did receive 1 comment card, Chairperson.
Mr. Bruce Crow.
In the words of Pauly Shore, I'm back. Well, good. Number 3, a 1-year extension of time for site plan review. It's good. Always take a little time, read things through, do some research. Clearly, the last issue is a prime example of that. You might need more time for a 2-story retail office building when considering, parking restrictions or exemptions. Increase exemptions of parking. That's an interesting way to phrase that. That's to eliminate parking, by the way. And however, make sure you go through everything, but you still need to know what SDG is and ESG is and LEED certification. Clearly, nobody has considered any of these acronyms and what they mean and who authors them and who is extending it down in a tyrannical fashion from the state of California or LA County or the federal government or the United Nations. You need to just come to a conclusion and have some findings that would be a positive impact, not just a negative impact. Because the onus, like in the last issue, is that you have to have the findings of a positive impact on the environment. We could look at, say, South Africa, where they've reached their environmental goals, but they don't have any running water or electricity anymore. They've reached their goals, though. It's all good, but they don't have any running water or electricity. So when considering reviewing something, take your time. Understand what SDG sustainable development goals are. Find out what your goals are. What would be a positive impact? Because you are the one saying that this would be positive if we have less parking and more people, as long as they could trot out 900 yards down the street and get on a bus, that we, the government, will provide the transportation to them. And a 15-minute city, the director mentioned 15 minutes. That comes into play. Find out what a 15-minute city is, and you'll see what kind of society you want to have with that. But take your time on this and go through it thoroughly and understand the positive impact that you're claiming that it is. If you don't have a clue, don't vote on it, pass on it till it gets sorted out. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no objection by the planning commission, I will close public participation for the agendized items. Close. Consent calendar, item number 3 and 4. Does any member of the planning commission wish to pull items from the separate discussion? For separate discussion? No. Might entertain a motion. In a second.
Motion to approve the attached minutes.
No motion? I mean, a second, I'm sorry.
I second the motion to approve the attached minutes.
Thank you. Nobody opposed? 3-0.
Chairperson, if I may, I just want to let you guys know under the consent calendar, there are 2 items. It's for the 1-year extension as well as the approval of the July 19th, 2023 minutes.
So do we need to make a new motion to include those 2?
No, I just wanted to let you guys know,
Okay.
since I know you guys only mentioned the minutes. If there are no changes, then the motion passes 3-0.
Okay, so those are no changes. We don't need no vote on that one, right?
No, the motion passes.
3 and 4. Discussion for item number 5. Amendments to Planning Commission bylaws. Steve Jones will please introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. At the July 19th regular PC meeting, staff comments included a conversation regarding regulation of working hours and consistent meeting times with other commissions. So this item is for the commission to discuss and vote on a meeting time that aligns with other commissions. City staff from the Housing Division hosts community workshops on the city's rent stabilization and tenant eviction protection regulations on 3rd Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So that corresponds to your 3rd Wednesday meeting. And due to a technical staffing issue, we want to make sure to give them enough time to reset from that workshop to the Planning Commission. So you may want to consider a 5:15 p.m. start time instead of 5 as the staff report says. And it may be more considerate to allow them adequate time again to reset and for preparation and setup. So today's workshop was less than half an hour. So they were done before 4:30. So we had a lot of time. But yeah, I think that you considering 5:15 is appropriate. and the item is open for discussion and can be moved for action. It would be implemented in the next planning commission meeting, which is September 20th, 2023. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissions,
Yeah, on my behalf, 5:15 works pretty well.
okay.
I just have a question. How long do those meetings typically run? I just want to make sure that we give them enough time to get things together.
Sure. I think the timing is probably on order of magnitude, probably gonna be about half an hour. I think as time goes on, people in the city get used to the ordinance, which is still fairly new. It will lessen. So if we're looking at 30 to 40 minutes for their meetings, that should give us enough time to make sure we allow adequate space for resetting.
Okay, considering that the 5:15 start time is fine with me.
Okay, 5:15 will be the time then. We have a motion to approve the 5:15.
Yeah, motion to adopt resolution PC 2023-09, amending bylaws to accommodate a 5:15 start of meeting.
I second the motion.
Secretary, will you please give me a roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Barcena,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson De La Rosa,
Yes.
and Chairperson Rivera.
Yes. Thank you. Public comments is now open for the item not listed on the planning commission agenda. Secretary, will you please announce the instructions for public participation?
The members of the public will now have an opportunity to speak on items not listed on the planning commission agenda. Please state your name. For the record, each speaker and written comments are limited to 3 minutes. Callers wishing to make a comment may do so at this time by dialing *9 from your phone. When instructed, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Individuals joining through the Zoom app may request to make a comment by using the raise hand feature on Zoom and select the unmute or microphone icon when instructed. We will begin to hear from members of the public that are physically present in the council chambers. If you haven't already done so, please submit your comment cards now. And Chairperson, we did receive one comment card.
Thank you. Mr. Bruce Crowe.
I'm gonna sound like a broken record here. Non-agenda, it is important. You need to write these acronyms down and understand what they mean, because there's a score involved in these things. SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a score involved in it. If you want to purchase a property, do you have a good enough score to purchase or build a property? ESG is environmental, social, governmental. You're going to be scored on certain things from the big bankers who are going to be providing you the funding, unless you can pay for something right out of your pocket, which most of us cannot. Whether you have a good enough environment and a social credit score. Social credit score. Maybe you and I differ on a social issue. Why should I be penalized for me having the liberty and freedom to think the things I think, and you get a positive input from somebody that they may like your version of something better than I do. So you may like higher taxes. I like lower taxes. So they're not going to give me the money or the funding. They're going to give it to you, because they're going to want you to provide more taxation. These are things that are important. And LEED certification, that's here in California, that's an SB 9. Also, 15-minute city. Understand what a 15-minute city is. You're not going to be able to travel more than 15 minutes from your residence that you are assigned from a government tyranny. They'll have the public transportation for you. You won't need a car. You won't need a parking spot. They will provide the apartment for you. You will not have a single family dwelling. This is what their plan is, and you need to preserve your liberty and your freedom, and you need to resist it. That's right there in our Declaration and our Constitution. So you need to understand what these things are, because some people are trying them. And if you're going to put your trust in the government, well, look at what they've done for them in Lahaina, Hawaii. They allowed the trees to grow because they wouldn't sell their property. The winds came, the tree limbs fell on the power lines. There was like little explosions. The power lines short circuited. The power goes back up into the transformers and boom, it blows up. And they just start blowing up everywhere. Now they're trying to say, well, there's lasers were shot down. No, the transformers blew up and in 70-mile-an-hour winds, everybody burned to death. That's what they did. Thank you, government.
Thank you. If there is no objection by the planning commission, I will close the public comments on that agenda item. Staff, any comments?
Just a few notes. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Your item that you acted on today will be at a meeting, at the City Council meeting in September, just so you know. And to recap some of the items that staff and the council acted on last time we met, or between the last time we met on the August 14th meeting, up to approximately $1.2 million of permanent local housing assistance funding was authorized to provide rent payments assistance. And obviously, again, at the meeting, we heard about former Commissioner Gabriela Garcia's appointment. So then we can anticipate commissioners being appointed to your commission as well. July 24th, council received your commission's recommendation of approval of ordinance number 933 to simplify the zoning code location of standards and permit alternative vehicle maneuvering at rear yards for required parking for residential uses, and unanimously adopted the regulations. This is to accommodate different locations of housing so that we could assist, for example, ADUs and other types of dwelling units in different locations on residential sites. This is a boon to our housing element and to us meeting the regional housing needs assessment. Also, bi-weekly reports indicated that we interacted with 26 consults at our public counter, referred 7 business licenses for approval to the business license section, and began processing of at least 15 site plan reviews, projects, and 3 conditional use permits were received. So you'll be looking to act on those in the coming months. And then finally, our EJ survey reminders went out as well. And we have the website link. If you've not had an opportunity to take part in that survey, it's https://bit, that's bit.ly/BellGardensEJ. That's bit.ly/BellGardensEJ, all one word. So that's going to help us get community input on the environmental justice element. And that's working, I want to say until the end of the month at least, but we'll have it open and live until sometime in September as well. And then just to forecast what's coming up to your agenda, the item that was continued today is anticipated for next month. It's to accommodate storage on lots with existing automobile repair facilities and permitted primary use with required development standards. Making it a permitted primary use with certain development standards with certain proximity to automobile repair facilities. So right now, the automobile repair facilities find it challenging to store their queuing vehicles on sites that are constrained, and we find there's spillover parking and there's spillover queuing and spillover storage onto our public streets, which takes away parking spaces and provides a safety hazard in many instances, blocking fire hydrants and parking in the red. And there's different things that we're requiring that are, again, challenging for certain automobile repair facilities. So allowing them to establish on vacant lots as long as they're within certain proximity. I think it's going to be anywhere from 300 to 500 feet of an existing automobile repair facility with certain development standards should allow for more elegant solutions to free up parking on the street and make sure that storage is being accommodated in a way that blends with the existing fabric of the neighborhoods and not turning into automobile impound yards and other types of nuisances. So that's coming before you next month. That's it for staff comments.
One recommendation, make sure you put down in the quality of life in Bell Gardens, so we don't forget. Because it might go and we might lose it.
We're doing our best. We will.
Staff, any other comments? No comments? We go to the commission's comments.
I just have a question in regards to the zoning code amendment that was approved today. What steps will be taken to ensure that the developers, the public, and other stakeholders are informed about the proposed amendment to the amendment?
To
Dash
parking
05.
requirement.
Yeah.
So we're going to actually do a public notice this week since you guys did approve it or did recommend approval, rather. It hasn't been approved yet. And there's an ad that's taken out in the paper, and that's essentially the long and short of it. So property owners are notified via our website, via the newspaper, and we're taking steps to look at ways to add it on social media as well. So our website, getting it out on social media, I think we'll look into that, and the paper.
I appreciate, these, methods of advertising, but I feel like to find this information, you kind of have to like go out of your way and look for it. Would it be possible to send a in-mail notice to these folks that would be in the affected radius of, the zoning code?
Of the corner, Florence and Garfield? I think that's something we could do, actually. The price to notify, for instance, citywide is a little prohibitive, but we'll look into the 500-foot radius for the corner of Florence and Garfield.
Thank you.
Good suggestion.
Commission? Well, the parking, it might affect the citywide, right?
It would. And so that's where our standards are, to notify in the paper and additionally online and in our social media.
Yeah, because here in Garfield in Florence it can be done some things, but citywide is a big problem. So I think everybody needs to know even what's going on in Florence and Garfield, but what is going on all over the place in the city. And I hope that you can put down that some of these items are coming from the state with the mandate. It's not the city, so the people and the residents understand that we've been imposed these rules, because I think it's misinformation about this. They think that we trying to do this in the city, and a lot of these items, we can resist probably and go after prepare with the attorney, but we don't have the money to fight. So we're not like Orange County. Orange County is fighting for, but we can't. So we got to be very careful, but we got to inform our people.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like you said, the misconception, and sometimes it's just misinformation. It's not no parking in the whole city. It's just, a half a mile from a certain bus stop at the end of the day. But we'll definitely look into the notification for at least that area so that they get an additional notice. And then the citywide is something that, we'll make sure that it's noticed in the paper appropriately, and we'll do our best to, promote it even more. But the parking exception expansion is just for that one area. So that's definitely not citywide, but I get the implication that it's, effective and people should know what's going on in their city, but the actual ordinance only affects, for now, that one section. Yeah.
Well, we have the ADUs that is affected citywide. you mentioned those two, and we need to inform our people. We had the ADUs and the juniors, and we got a lot of those that are going into the city. And I think it's very good to inform the people that those are Mondays that are coming to us, and it might affect some of our neighborhoods. And I think that's what they need to know. They need to really understand what is going on, because it might be a few, not just one, but it's gonna be a few.
ADUs, that legislation is already passed, and I think at some point it's actually expiring. So there's only so many more years of the actual ADU ordinance that's unless it gets extended. But there's nothing going on with ADUs right now.
No?
Yeah, nothing legislatively. But
Okay,
when people come in for them, we're just processing them as, if they're new, we're processing them as new projects for administrative review.
thank you. Commissions?
I do have one more question.
Okay.
Has the department received any application in regards to the cannabis dispensary permit or anything related to that topic?
So we've got 3 conditional use permit requests that we're looking at right now. So those will be coming to you guys soon.
Thank you. Commissions, no more comments? Need a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to give a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So be it. Thank you and adjourn.